大家好，欢迎收看全球瞭望，我是郭崇伦。我今天在美国在台协会台北办事处，我今天要专访的对象就是最近这2天在台北访问的美国国务院主管经贸事务的助理国务卿芮福金先生。Welcome, Ambassador Redmond, to be our show.
Well, thank you very much, and let me also say thank you because it's my first time ever on UDN TV, and it's a great honor for me and a pleasure to have the chance to address the Taiwan people directly.
Thank you. To begin with, your visit of Taiwan is considered very highly symbolic in terms of Washington consider Taiwan as a very important ally. But how important do you think Taiwan is for Washington, especially in terms of economic and trade relations?
You know, I think it's interesting that you use the word symbolic because that isn't actually how I see this visit. What I see is having the chance to visit our 10th largest trading partner. Okay. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs of the State Department. This is our 7th largest export market for agriculture. It's our 2nd largest export market for agriculture if you take it you know, on a per capita basis. It's, you know, we have, when you think about the future of the digital economy, I mean, statistics are extraordinary. 90% probably of all smartphones come through Taiwan. Taiwan is at the heart of an important and vibrant region, and as Assistant Secretary for Economic Affairs, I'm here to engage.
But sometimes without diplomatic relations and also no high-level visit, especially not like Europe, this is the exception. We are sometimes forgetting how important our two countries has such a strong tie. I would like to take TPP as an example. I mean, we in Taiwan just cannot believe Taiwan has a lesser degree of market openness than Vietnam. And while Vietnam is on the first round of negotiation of TPP, Taiwan is not. Why is that?
Well, let me say that I think my colleagues in the U.S. government have expressed appreciation for Taiwan's interest. And we are now near the finish line. We are close to being able to negotiate an historic partnership. TPP with the 12 nations that are currently here represent 30% of world trade and 40% of world GDP, 50% of the world's projected economic growth just in those 12 nations. And we're working right now and we're hopeful that Congress will pass TPA, and we're hopeful that Trade Promotion Authority, TPA, will then enable a quick closure of TPP. Once TPP is closed, then the 12 nations can talk about who might be next. Okay. And again, America appreciates the expressed interest by Taiwan.
When you visit President Ma yesterday, President Ma also mentioned that he's hoping that the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, especially economic relationship, can take up to another level. So do you expect that after the first round of negotiations is finished, Taiwan is very likely to become a candidate for the second round?
I think that I can't talk about who would be in the second round because it isn't something we are really talking about. We want to close TPP and then we'll discuss amongst the 12 parties. But I can say to any economy that might be interested in being part of TPP that there are a number of things that any economy can continue to do to liberalize trade and open markets and better prepare themselves. But I can't give advice to Taiwan about TPP because we're not really ready to discuss it with anybody until we close the deal.
Before that, when Taiwan raised this issue, always we get the response from the U.S. is that there's a lot of things still you had to overcome, like TIFA or other kind of trade obstacles. And Taiwan had to show itself that it's really genuine, dedicate itself, want to open up the market. Do you think the hurdle is still there?
Well, listen, there are always issues. Trade is a very complex topic, and there are many issues between any economies on advancing trade. And yes, we have talked about beef and about pork as issues, and those issues are really symbolic of market access issues that we hope to resolve with Taiwan. But I think it's not important to focus on any one issue, because trade is broad and complex. But generally speaking, I think it's important for every economy to try to reach the standards that we're hoping to set by the creation of TPP.
One last thing before we move on to another topic. President Obama outlined the rebalancing of Asia strategy. Then how important is TPP play its part in this overall strategy, do you think?
It's interesting that you say that. I talked about how it's 50% of the world's projected economic growth. But it's often been said by American officials lately that TPP is broader than economics. Our Secretary of Defense, in fact, mentioned that he would just as easily have TPP over a new aircraft carrier, which is an unusual comment from a Secretary of Defense. But you know, what he's reiterating is something that, but when you think about it, it's not unusual, because he understands the importance that economics plays in national security. So John Kerry, our Secretary of State, has often said that economic policy is foreign policy, and foreign policy is economic policy. So TPP is very important to the rebalance, and you know, America has the chance with TPP to set the standards for 40% of the world's GDP, the highest possible standards ever negotiated. So yes, it's very important to the rebalance.
It's interesting you mentioned the Defense Secretary. Mr. Carter had been strongly criticizing China for building up island and trying to dominate South China Sea. I'm not asking about the security, but if China had been tried to breaching the security order, do you think China also tried to do it in terms of economic order in this part of the world?
Listen, the only thing I really want to say about the South China Sea is that all claims need to be made in accordance with international law, and in particular the law of the sea. And you know, freedom of navigation and overflight is the linchpin of security in the Pacific. But, sir, I really am not here to talk about that. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs, and that's really not something that I think would you know, you should speak to some other experts in the U.S. government.
But there's a parallel thing I have in mind, that China have been criticizing the global economic order that is biased toward the rising economy. They are especially mentioning about IMF and World Bank. Of course, you all know that the BRIC countries set up their own monetary mechanism and also their BRIC bank these days. Do you think China had a point when they mentioned or try to push the reform in IMF or World Bank?
President Obama has spoken out in favor of IMF reform, but I think you're touching on a broader issue that I'd love to have the chance to clarify. Often it's been misrepresented that the United States is somehow against the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is what you touched on when you spoke about other development institutions. And that's absolutely not true. It's absolutely not true. We know that the infrastructure development need, infrastructure investment in Asia writ large, is so much bigger than the resources of the AIIB, the ADB, and the World Bank combined. And the way to meet those needs is to have private sector involvement. And of course the private sector will seek the highest possible standards as they approach these markets. And what we've argued from the beginning is that AIIB should partner with the World Bank, it should partner with the ADB, share best practices, and make sure that we're all integrated into a global economic architecture. That's what we're looking for, and you know, I think it's misrepresented to say that we are trying to prevent that from happening.
So the U.S. had never discouraged Taiwan of joining in the AIIB?
What America has encouraged is that the AIIB takes advantage of the 70 years of learning that the World Bank has, and that it is put into the economic infrastructure and architecture that already exists. That's what we've been encouraging. We aren't discouraging people from joining. We're encouraging the institution itself to uphold those standards, and are hopeful that the AIIB will again partner with the existing infrastructure.
So looking back in retrospect, do you think that maybe U.S. should take a different kind of approach to AIIB when it first started a few months ago? That by saying that the U.S. is interested in participating, and maybe it can increase the transparency in the AIIB?
I think that I disagree, sir, with the framing of your question. We don't disagree with our approach. Our approach has been consistent from the very beginning. We, America, are not going to join any additional institutions at the moment, but if another one comes, we welcome it because there is a need, but we welcome it as it fits into the existing economic infrastructure and architecture. And we encourage something of the scope of the AIIB to partner with the ADB and partner with the World Bank and really do extraordinary work. We don't have any hindsight regrets. We've been consistent with our story. They've just been, in some cases, misreported.
Okay, another thing. Yesterday, China and Korea had signed this FTA agreement, and this had some psychological impact on Taiwan. Maybe there's a real impact in terms of trade and other economic development. How did U.S. see this kind of agreement? You encourage that kind of thing, the bilateral agreement, or do you think that it's something you should examine it very closely?
America has been consistent in encouraging high standard free trade around the world, and that's why we're trying to conclude this historic deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And if we're successful in concluding it, then we hope to conclude the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, which together would encompass maybe even 2/3 of the world's GDP, setting the highest standards with our friends around the world, and that's what we're focusing on right now.
Okay. Let me quote Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong when he talked about in Shangri-La Dialogue. And I said, China and U.S. will not carve up the Pacific into two spheres of influence. And in the long term, he hoped China would join TPP and U.S. and Japan would join AIIB. It seems to reflect some of the thinking in Asian countries. They are afraid that they're going to be caught up in the fight between China and United States, and they'll have to be forced to take side. What do you say to that kind of thinking or mentality?
What I say, and again with the deepest respect, is I don't agree with the framing of your question. You're saying to me that there's this sides to take between America and China, and I say to you that the American-Chinese relationship has never been deeper or broader. The strategic and economic dialogue that we have across government is rather extraordinary. Every area of the interagency is working together with China, and in fact, my bureau, along with USTR, have already had 19 rounds of negotiations for bilateral investment treaty. We are not at all about taking sides with China. And your question about China joining the TPP. I mean, Michael Froman has been very clear. U.S. Ambassador, USTR Michael Froman has said, when we close this deal, we will consider other interested economies, and if that economy is willing to reach the high standards that we are setting, then we will be considering their entry. No one's ever said that China wasn't able to apply, but we're focusing on closing it first, and then we're going to look see what other economies out there are willing to seek the high standards that we're setting for the world.
With due respect, I'm not talking about my opinion. It's Li Xianlong's.
I think it's wrong to frame it that way. America is partnering with China in any number of areas, and I was just there with the Secretary of State at APEC not too long ago, and I met with business leaders in China who were making large investments in the United States, and China's investment in the United States this year is greater than America's investment in China. The economic relationship is something that I focus on, and I focus on all over the world, including between the economies of America and Taiwan. And that's why I'm here. And I see great potential in the bilateral economic relationship between America and Taiwan.
I'll turn to Taiwan right now.
That's good, because that's where we are.
Especially, I'd like to talk about there's a growing criticism on Taiwan's economic relations with China these days. There's two kinds of major criticism. One is that Taiwan economy become more and more dependent on China. That will give China some of the economic leverage toward Taiwan. That's one. And the second thing is that this kind of economic links is not really trickling down to the general public, that the general public is not benefiting from this tie. Do you think those are fair criticism for the link that is happening now between Taiwan and China?
Taiwan will make its own decisions about where it wants to invest and with whom it wishes to partner. That's really not for me to say. My job is to promote the economic bilateral relationship between Taiwan and America. And there are many exciting things that we're doing. And one of them, we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, is ICT. And, some of the statistics I mentioned earlier, that 90% of smart devices pass through Taiwan, and 25% of the world's semiconductors are made here, and it's the #1 manufacturing market for integrated circuits. And Taiwan shares America's belief in a free, open, and multi-stakeholder internet. And there's so much that we can do together around the world, but also, in promoting entrepreneurship, in promoting innovation. And these are themes that I've been trying to push during my time here in Taiwan.
And I fully understand that Taiwan and the United States, there's a growing economic and cooperation going on. But having this economic link between Taiwan and China, do you think that can also reduce the previous tension that is happening between Taiwan and China? Or do you think this kind of link sometimes will create more tension in a way?
I can't speak, and it really isn't my place to speak, about Taiwan's decision to increase their economic relations with China. What I can say is that economic engagement is important to bind nations closer together. When I mentioned that Secretary Kerry's philosophy that economic policy is foreign policy, that's part of it. In our case, the closer our economic ties are with our friends around the world, the stronger our diplomatic relationships. But I really am not here to give advice to Taiwan or to have an opinion about that issue. That's not for me to do. That's the authorities here who need to decide that.
So you've been in Taiwan like more than 48 hours now, or less than 48 hours?
It feels like a minute, and it feels like a week, because the AIT here has scheduled an extraordinary and an aggressive schedule for me. What I'm excited about is I had the chance to meet with a number of senior officials, including President Ma, the National Security Council, the Foreign Minister, any number of them. But I also had a chance to meet with American businesses doing business in Taiwan and to hear about their stories and about what they like and what they don't like and how it can be done better. I had a wonderful lunch today with the Minister of the Economy and a number of Taiwan businesses, many of whom are doing business in America, and I push them a bit on what we can do more and what will make it more attractive to come to America and how do we increase those ties. I had a chance to speak to entrepreneurs today, which was incredibly interesting and fun for me as a former CEO of a small business over at the Taiwan Air Force Innovation Park, which was fantastic. I met hundreds of energetic young Taiwan entrepreneurs who wanted to take on the world, and to be able to share some experiences with them was fantastic. The fact that we created the U.S.-Taiwan Digital Economy Forum, that we've announced that, and that we have an IP and innovation joint work plan to help navigate the IP protection in the new world that's opened up with the internet. So the AIT has put together an amazing schedule. So the civil society and officials and businesses. It's been eye-opening for me.
The impression you got for the Taiwan economy seemed to be different from what we have in here that we see in the press, or it's very pessimistic. But you're having a very optimistic view on Taiwan's future. That are you seeing that Taiwan's growth will be coming back? And Taiwan growth have been like 2 or 3%, at most 3%. That this is not like what we used to have, like 7 or 8%, even double digit before. But you seem to be very optimistic about Taiwan economy.
Excuse my optimism. Maybe it's in my nature. Maybe it's because I'm an American. I don't know. But I can tell you that I do see enormous potential. And I'm impressed. I mean, it's an important member of APEC. It's a major economy in the Asia Pacific. And the fact that it has become now our 10th largest trading partner, the fact that America has passed Japan as the second biggest export market for Taiwan is a big deal. The fact that we remain the largest investor in Taiwan, what we benefit from and why we're in discussion on an economic level is the more with this increased investment by both economies, the more transparency and predictability and the better we follow the rule of law, the more investment will follow. So that's what's exciting about these discussions, and I am optimistic. And as I said earlier, when you think of how central Taiwan is to the future of IT, given its history and given its capabilities, and we're heading in, as I was hearing from executives from American companies like Google and Yahoo and IBM talking about the Internet of Things, and many of them are present here, and many of them see a great future in ICT between the American and Taiwan economies. So of course I'm optimistic.
I understand this is not your first time visit of Taiwan. Can you tell me about your first time?
I can. If I go back in 35 years in my mind, I can tell you that when I got out of university, I wanted to see the world, and this is a part of the world back in 1984 that I had never seen. And so with a couple of good friends, we came here, and we had an extraordinary experience in 1984, and I've always wanted to come back and never have had the chance to. And to come back now as a senior State Department official running the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs makes it even more meaningful, because now I can be in a position to try to help grow the economic link between our two economies.
And hope you have a very nice day in Taiwan. Thank you.
I have, sir. Thank you for the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.